Penguin Random House Audio presents The Awakened Brain, The New Science of Spirituality and Our Quest for an Inspired Life, by Lisa Miller, Ph.D., with Esme Schwal-Wygand. Read for you by Brittany Pressley. To Fill with Love. Never cease to stand like curious children before the great mystery into which we were born. Albert Einstein. Author's Notes. This book is intended to provide helpful information on the subjects discussed. It is not meant to be used to diagnose or treat any specific medical condition. Please be certain to consult with your own healthcare provider before making any decisions that affect your health. Names and identifying details of some of the people portrayed in this book have been changed. Introduction. Anything true can be shown. It was the summer of 2012. I hurried down the narrow, fluorescent-lit hallway of the psychiatry lab at Columbia University Medical School. Coffee balanced in one hand, mind racing. Today, our MRI, magnetic resonance imaging team, would finally get our eyes on the results of months and months of research. Ravi, the statistical analyst, caught up to me in the hall, his eyes wide, a stunned expression on his usually composed face. He held a stack of papers in his trembling hands. "I ran the data many times," he said. "It's all very surprising." For close to a year, our team had been working long, hard hours to design and implement a cutting-edge study to peer into the brain to learn more about preventing depression. Ravi worked closest to the machines and statistics, steadily punching buttons, collecting data, modeling the findings, running numbers. Today, he would show us a first glimpse of the results that would tell us whether or not spirituality plays a role in preventing or protecting against depression. I love every part of science. The push and beckon of a question, the challenge and rigor of finding the best way to test what is true. But I especially love this part of science, the first reckoning with the data. This would be our first thrilling view of where the numbers led, and we hoped what we saw might help us toward a new possibility for alleviating mental suffering. We live in an age of unprecedented mental anguish. Depression, anxiety, and substance abuse have reached epidemic proportions globally. In 2017, 66.6 million Americans, more than half of the respondents on the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, reported binge drinking within the past month, and 20 million met the criteria for a substance use disorder. 31% of American adults will develop a full-blown anxiety disorder at some point in their lives, and 19% in any given year. The World Health Organization reports that 264 million people on the planet are depressed. Depression is the third most costly disability worldwide. Each year, 17 million American adults are depressed. Over 16% of youth in late adolescence currently face depression, and the impact of depression on suicide accounts for the second leading cause of death in adolescence, rivaled only by death by auto accident. At Columbia University, where I teach, 8 students died by suicide in 2016-2017. A study of more than 67,000 college students across 108 institutions in the United States, published in 2019, found that 20% reported that they had engaged in self-harm, such as cutting. 24% reported suicidal ideation, and 9% had attempted suicide. While the stakes of our mental health crisis are truly life and death, many of us also suffer from less debilitating, though still painful, conditions. Burnout and chronic stress, trouble concentrating and connecting, loneliness and isolation. Lives that are rich in many ways, yet feel somehow narrow, hollow, and cut off. Even when we experience success and satisfaction, we may sense that there's more to happiness, that life could be more joyful, rewarding, and meaningful. It seems that every person I meet has a parent, child, sibling, partner, or close friend afflicted by depression, anxiety, substance abuse, or chronic stress. And there's not a lot on offer for those of us worried about a loved one or struggling ourselves. Our mainstay treatments for depression, psychotherapy and antidepressant medications such as SSRIs, provide some help to people, but for others have disappointing results. Only half of treated patients see a disappearance of symptoms within a year of intervention, while another 20% find only a partial reduction of symptoms. And the positive effects that are gained through medication are not enduring. When we stop taking the drugs, depression or anxiety often returns. I hoped that today's lab meeting might reveal even an inkling of a sustainable solution to our devastating crisis in wellness and mental health. Ravi followed me into a crowded room, and we squeezed into the last 2 open seats around the long wood laminate table. His fingers drummed the stack of papers. He usually worked with a detached, skeptical cool. "We can run the data from the scanner," he'd said, "but I seriously doubt we'll find anything." Myrna, the MRI team's most senior colleague, and the one who had secured the funding for this study, had agreed, saying, "I'd be very surprised if we find any kind of association between spirituality and depression, but we shall see." Contemporary psychotherapy tended to characterize spirituality and religion as a crutch or defense, a set of comforting beliefs to lean on in hard times. In our field, spirituality was a barely studied, nearly invisible variable. Over the past 20 years of my career, I'd seen surprising clinical and epidemiological evidence that spirituality could have a protective benefit for our mental health. But could we discern a concrete physiological function of spirituality in our health and development? Was spirituality thus far invisible in the brain because it was insignificant to mental health or impossible to measure? Or was it invisible because no one had yet looked? Myrna cleared her throat and started the meeting. "Let's take a few moments to review the initial MRI findings," she said. "I believe Ravi's compiled a handout with the new results." Our team had used Myrna's multi-generational sample of clinically depressed and non-depressed women and their children and grandchildren. We'd taken MRI scans of people at high and low genetic risk for depression to see if there were any patterns among the brain structures of depressed and non-depressed participants that could allow us to develop more targeted and effective treatments. And we'd added a new and controversial question to our study. We'd asked all participants to respond to a major question used in the clinical science literature to quantify inner life. How personally important is religion or spirituality to you? In addition to comparing the brain structures of depressed and non-depressed candidates, we wanted to see how spirituality was associated with brain structure and how spirituality correlated with risk for depression. Ravi's face still looked stunned, and his hands jittery as he passed his stack of papers around the room. I took a 2-page color handout from the pile. It was still warm from the printer. My eyes raced over the page, taking in the results, looking for whatever it was that seemed to have rattled Ravi. It took only a moment for me to see it. On the top half of the page was a black rectangle with 2 brain images inside. The scan on the left showed the composite brain image of participants with low spirituality, those who had reported that religion or spirituality was of medium, mild, or low importance. The scan on the right showed the composite brain of participants with sustained, high spirituality, those who had said religion or spirituality was of high personal importance. The difference between the 2 images made my heart race and my spine tingle. The brain on the left, the low spiritual brain, was flecked intermittently with tiny red patches. But the brain on the right, the brain showing the neural structure of people with stable and high spirituality, had huge swaths of red, at least 5 times the size of the small flecks in the other scan. The finding was so clear and stunning, it stopped my breath. The high spiritual brain was healthier and more.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?